Mr.
President, we regret that some members of the Security Council continue to grossly violate its previous decisions and impose on others their fabrications about the alleged restoration of the work of the UNSC 1737 Committee. We have to remind you once again that the adoption of UNSC Resolution 2231 in 2015 terminated the Council's earlier resolutions with regard to the Islamic Republic of Iran. Resolution 2231 itself became invalid, as it was envisaged, on October 18, 2025. The mechanism laid down in it for the restoration of anti-Iranian Security Council resolutions was not used for a number of reasons, which our country and a number of other delegations have repeatedly and in the most detailed way explained to our colleagues in the Council and all UN member states. No deliberate distortion of the letter of UNSC Resolution 2231 and the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action approved by it, as well as references to the erroneous and illegal position of the UN Secretariat leadership, are relevant here. There are no grounds for holding a briefing by the UNSC 1737 Committee, and will not be. This body ceased to exist in 2015, and the Council did not make any decisions on the resumption of its work. In view of the above, we ask the Chairmanship to put the issue of holding today's meeting to a procedural vote. We call on all colleagues to take a responsible position in order to maintain the authority of the Council and its decisions and vote against the adoption of the agenda. Thank you. Keynote speech. Mr. President, we regret that the majority of the members of the Security Council continue to indulge the legal and procedural nihilism of Western countries. Such actions not only harm the effectiveness of the Council's work, but also simply undermine its credibility. We are grateful to our colleagues who did not vote for the approval of the agenda of this meeting, and thus spoke in favor of maintaining the integrity of the decisions previously adopted by the Security Council. Mr. President, as the practice of recent months shows, the UN Security Council meetings on the Iranian nuclear program, initiated by the United States and European countries, have nothing to do with the tasks of maintaining international peace and security. Their speeches clearly show that they do not care about the global nuclear non-proliferation regime, and on the contrary, they ignore the direct threats posed to it. The true goal of the Western countries is to create the illusion of restoring the anti-Iranian resolutions of the Council and resuming the work of the relevant UNSC Committee 1737, that is, to trample on the legal and procedural foundations of the Security Council's work in the interests of exerting pressure on the Islamic Republic of Iran. The position of the Russian Federation regarding the alleged snapback is consistent and principled. It has been repeatedly brought to the attention of the UN member states, and everyone can familiarize themselves with the letters of Russia, China and Iran on this matter distributed in the Security Council and the General Assembly, as well as with our numerous statements in the Council. However, for the especially forgetful, I will voice the main points. The letter sent to the Security Council by the United Kingdom, France and Germany in August 2025 that they were launching a snapback was not a corresponding notification within the meaning of UNSC Resolution 2231. These countries had no right to resort to this mechanism due to their chronic and serial violations of this document, and the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, JCPOA, approved by it, as well as gross disregard for the provisions of the JCPOA that any dispute arising within the framework of the implementation of the plan should have been comprehensively considered within the framework of the dispute settlement mechanism at the Vienna platform before being submitted to the UN Security Council. For this reason, the results of the Council's vote on 19th of September 2025 on the draft resolution wrongfully introduced by the Republic of Korea could not have entailed any legal and procedural consequences in terms of the implementation of the snapback. No matter how much our Western colleagues try to convince us of the opposite, the reality is inexorable. There was no restoration of the anti-Iranian sanctions of the Security Council. UNSC Resolution 2231 ceased to be in force, as it prescribed, on October 18, 2025. On the same day, the agenda item non-proliferation was removed from the list of issues dealt with by the Security Council. That is, the Council completed its consideration of the issue around the Iranian nuclear program. No illegal steps by the UN Secretariat in violation of Article 100 of the UN Charter, including the restoration of the UNSC 1737 website and its sanctions list, can serve as an excuse. Thus, there is no reason to resume the work of the UNSC 1737 Committee and to brief it to the Council. The fact that some members of the Council are trying to prove the existence of the committee by organizing stakeouts only shows that they themselves are trying to prove to themselves and other UN members that their position is legally flawed. We deeply regret that the Colombian presidency followed the lead of unscrupulous delegations and even included a corresponding event in the Draft Security Council program of work for June 2026, as a result of which Russia and China were forced to oppose its adoption. We would like to once again emphasize the futility of any attempts to put on the rails the work of the 1737 Committee. My country will not allow the Council to adopt any decisions under the guise of this body that impose restrictions on member states. We will also continue to oppose the resumption of the work of its group of experts, for which the UN Secretariat is not mandated. We would like to draw your attention to the inadmissibility and futility of attempts to give legitimacy to the 1737 Committee by equating it with the really existing subsidiary bodies of the Security Council. We categorically reject the actions of the European members of the Council, who are blocking the approval of the decision on the distribution of chairmanship of the sanctions committees, which has been on the table for a long time, with their ultimatum and unfounded demands to include the 1737 Committee in it. In this way, they are holding the entire Council hostage. Colleagues, your blackmail will not work. Mr. President, the Council's procedural crisis did not come as a surprise. We warned our colleagues back in August last year that Western countries and their support group are leading us all to a dead end with their untenable attempts to launch a snapback. Moreover, Russia and China tried to prevent such a development of events. In September 2025, our countries came up with a draft Security Council resolution to extend Resolution 2231 in order to give additional time for diplomatic efforts around the Iranian nuclear program without creating a legal vacuum and a parallel reality in the Council. However, some members of the Security Council did not listen to us, and the UK, France and Germany decided to go all the way in their claims to the snapback, abandoning any agreements. However, the events that followed once again demonstrated their lack of real interest in the peaceful resolution of contradictions on the Iranian nuclear issue. This was eloquently evidenced by their reaction, or in fact its absence, to the aggressive actions of the United States and Israel against Iran, first in June 2025 and then from February 2026. The European countries were not at all concerned about the obvious gross violations of international law by Washington and West Jerusalem, or their attempts to undermine the global non-proliferation regime by striking Iran's peaceful nuclear facilities under IAEA safeguards, including repeated attacks in the immediate vicinity of the Bushehr nuclear power plant. Instead, Western delegations continued to repeat like a mantra their hackneyed theses about a certain threat to international peace and security allegedly emanating from the Iranian nuclear program. And this is despite the fact that the only source of objective and reliable information on this issue, the IAEA Director General's reports on inspections and monitoring in Iran, have never pointed to the facts of the conversion of nuclear material in the country for military purposes, and any problems with inspections arose solely as a result of the US-Israeli aggression. And now, Western delegations continue to try with all their might to convince everyone that the anti-Iranian Security Council resolutions have been restored, with the sole purpose of continuing to put pressure on Tehran and shifting responsibility for the current crisis in the Middle East to it. We would like to emphasize that further politicization of the UN Security Council's work on this issue will only spur a further spiral of escalation and will also have a negative impact on the prospects for a negotiated solution. In addition, such an unconstructive approach will hinder the creation of conditions for the resumption of IAEA verification activities in Iran, which have been undermined as a result of the illegal and reckless actions of the United States and Israel. We are convinced that this is not in the interests of the entire international community. We call on all members of the Council and its President to stop adding fuel to the fire and to focus on facilitating a political and diplomatic settlement around Iran, which has already involved a number of constructive-minded states, including our Pakistani colleagues. Russia is ready to fully assist these efforts. Thank you.